On this week's episode of Top of the List, we finish up our look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the final 5 films of Phase 3. Stay tuned to find out what's on top of the list.
All right, welcome back to this week's episode of Top of the List, everybody. So I'm Dom. This is my best friend Ryan Barnett, better known as RB. And this week we're going to be talking about MCU Phase 3 Part 2, so the last 5 films that have come out. But we're going to do things a little bit different this episode because me and Ryan have the exact same list. We might have different scores for each film, thinking, one's worse than the other or one's higher than the other. But we do have the same ranking order, meaning that my number 5 is the same as Ryan's, and as well as 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. So we'll also talk about what we think is at the top of the list for each of us, which we can argue either way for this set of films. We think all these films are pretty good, but we'll see which ones I like less and which ones he likes more, right?
I guess. I don't know. I think with you calling these films just pretty good, I think that's a little bit of an understatement or even an insult. I would argue that these 5 films, definitely the crown jewels, dare I say the Infinity Stones of the Infinity series. I'm a big fan of this part of the MCU. To me, all 5 of these films are pure gold, so really excited to get into it with this episode.
Pure gold, just like the Infinity Gauntlet, right, Ryan? The pure gems, huh?
Actually, so the Infinity Gauntlet is gold, but the gems are not. If you were a true fan of the films, you would know that. They are not gold. They all vary in color, which we see in the first film of this series, Infinity War, but we'll be talking about that a little later. I think we're going to dive in first with the film that ranks 5th on our list, Captain Marvel.
That's right, Ryan, but let me put you on the spot real quick and list all 6 Infinity Stones, bro.
All 6 by color, or how are we doing this?
Color and the name, bro. I need it all.
Okay, let's see what I can do.
Let's put you on the spot right here.
We've got the Reality Stone, which is the ether, which is red.
Okay, that's really good. Good job.
We've got the Power Stone, which is purple.
Yeah.
We've got the Soul Stone, which is found on Vormir, that is yellow.
Oh.
Oh, no, the Mind Stone is yellow. Hold on, you're right. The Mind Stone is yellow, and that is found in Loki's staff. Let's see, what am I missing here? The Time Stone, which is green, which is found in the Eye of Agamemnon.
Agamemnon?
Am I wrong there?
Eye of Agamemnon.
I was close. Okay,
I'm
not we went over this last episode. I'm not a big Doctor Strange fan.
I'll give it to you. Okay.
Man, so I know we have. So the stone in the Tesseract, and I'm blanking on which stone that is.
Ooh, the most important, the first one that Thanos, or the second one that Thanos gets in Infinity War.
And he gets it from Asgard, from Loki. Yep.
Yeah.
On the Asgard refugee ship. I don't know which stone that is. Help me out here. Which one is the Tesseract?
It's the blue stone, and
I know it's blue. Stone. Yeah. The Space Stone. There we go.
And it causes him to teleport across space.
And I'm missing the color for the Soul Stone.
Orange.
Okay, it's orange. So I was close with yellow.
Close.
Okay,
Dude, I'm very impressed. You did a really good job. You basically got them all.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to get fancy there with where they are all coming from, and screwed me up a little bit with the Tesseract, which I think is the first Infinity Stone we see on screen, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So. But anyways, yep, we're really excited about this to wrap up this part of our series, or this series on the MCU. And like I said, Captain Marvel. So why don't you take us away, Dom, with Captain Marvel?
Okay, so I'll start with my score for Captain Marvel. We both ranked this one 5th. So we're starting at the bottom of the list for us. We're going to move all the way to the top of the list. Haha, the title of our show. So for number 5, Captain Marvel, I'm going to give this a 6.5 out of 10. I think this is an okay film, not a good film. I wouldn't say in any sense of the word this is a good film, but it is above average. I would definitely say above average in many aspects. I know you're going to disagree with me on this, Ryan. I know for a fact you gave this one too high of a score. I know for a fact, dude, that you gave this one way too high of a score. Because honestly, if you think about it, this movie is really bland. A lot of the stuff in this movie is really bland compared to a lot of the other movies. This is only I'd say this is my Well, this is the third worst one for me. For then like I mean I would say Dark World is worse than this. I'd say Incredible Hulk is worse than this, but I would definitely say this one is not too far behind those guys. Um, let me see. Oh, so Brie Larson. Let's start there. Let's start with the main character, the title character, Brie Larson. Two points I want to make on her character. Then I'm going to pass it over to you for your score and your opinion on this. Okay, 2 points on her character. Number one, positive aspect of Brie Larson in this movie. Whenever her and Samuel L. Jackson are in a scene together, it's great. They play off of each other very well. In the entire rest of the movie, she's completely wooden. I could not get behind her plight. I could not get behind anything she has. There's one action scene that I was behind her in and that I thought she was awesome in, but the rest of the movie I thought was meh, you know?
I can agree with you on Brie Larson's performance. She's rather flat in this film, with the exception of her interactions with Samuel L. Jackson and her interaction with the daughter of Maria Rambo. I think those scenes are very touching. I enjoy those and the relationship she builds there or rebuilds with her mind. You know, she's had amnesia since becoming or coming to the Kree world. Personally, though, I mean, I find her to be on screen with those characters for a lot of the film, and like I said, I love the chemistry between her and Samuel L. Jackson. I love this film. I'm going to give this film an 8.5 out of 10. So
High.
definitely between a good and a great film. Well, you rank Doctor Strange way too high, so we can
Oh,
agree to
damn.
disagree there.
Throwing some shade. Throwing some shade. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan's throwing some shade this
uh,
episode.
I no, personally though, I love this film start to finish, and I mean with the start. How about the tribute to Stan Lee in the opening Marvel lead in there, where we usually have all the different characters. Instead, we have just different photos of Stan Lee. This was the first film released after Stan Lee's passing, if I'm not mistaken.
I think
Uh,
you're right, yeah.
but I love this. So maybe I love. Maybe it's because I love all the obscure '90s references. Reminds me a lot of my childhood. Blockbuster Video, Radio Shack.
Yeah, but that's let me stop you there. That's the thing. I came into this movie like you. I wanted a lot of references to my childhood. I got it a little bit with Blockbuster Video, Radio Shack, but dude, think about Guardians of the Galaxy and how much references they have to the 80s there. Think about some of the other films they go back in time and they reference things in that. There's like two references in this movie from
I
the 90s.
I put this film. I'm sorry, I put this film as just one notch below Guardians of the Galaxy. I thought they did a great job in integrating '90s. Were they in Los Angeles? If I'm not mistaken, it was Los Angeles, correct?
I think it's LA, yeah, I'm not sure
Yeah.
though.
I don't
I
know.
don't like this
I
movie, so I
really
don't watch it
like
that much.
I really like this film. I'm gonna say, and you're probably not gonna back me up on this one. It's almost an old school Tarantino like film in the fact that we spend the whole film building around who is Veers, who is Carol Danvers, and I love that as she pieces together her background. I mean, I think we have the same story arc in Reservoir Dogs, in Pulp Fiction, in Kill Bill. We learn about her as the character learns about herself. And I think the twist in this film with the scrolls is awesome. It was something I did not see coming at all.
Okay. Okay. So here, I can agree with you. This does have some similarities with Kill Bill. Okay. With as far as like the flashbacks to what her life was like before. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. And I don't know if you've seen these movies or not. But have you seen the Bourne movies?
I've seen the Firstborn and the
Okay.
Bourne Supremacy.
That's all you need to know. The
Okay.
Firstborn. One
Yes.
of the best thrillers I've ever seen, action
Very
thrillers.
great film. Yes.
Okay, so he's a normal guy at the beginning of the movie. He's kind of has to learn how much of an awesome fighter and badass he is during the course of the film, right?
Correct.
Okay, so in this movie, she's already kind of like, a fighter. She's already kind of a warrior, but you're getting flashbacks to her life before, whereas in The Born Identity is the first one, Born Identity. And in The Born Identity, you're finding out that he's awesome in the present. You don't really get that many flashbacks. You find out in the present. Like, for example, let me bring up one scene, and that's something this movie could have done and they didn't deliver on, is when he's first in the bank vault in that movie and he's finding the keys to his past and everything. And then he first has to get into a combat fight. and the guy is going to hit him with a flashlight, and then boom, he just catches it like this, and then he just realizes, what, I can like fight, and he's just like starts
Yeah.
fighting people. Like, that's finding out through action how awesome the character is. And this movie, it's just not empowering at all. That like she's just she like I like the part of it where she's like an awesome, really powerful character, but I don't know. It's not. I don't know. Okay, so here's my other comparison movie I want to make too. Wonder Woman, a fantastic female-led superhero movie, one of the few DC movies that I actually really am a big fan of. Okay, after that movie, you know, even though you and me are guys, after that movie, I felt like women that saw that movie would be very empowered with her portrayal on the screen and seeing a female character on the screen. In this movie, she's so wooden, I couldn't get behind her or her plight. Like, why is
Now let me
go.
jump back. You couldn't get behind her plight where she's meeting with the Supreme Intelligence, and she
Terrible
takes
character.
off the. Oh my God! You did not like who was it? Annette Bening?
I think so.
I believe it was Annette Bening. Yeah, I thought she
Hate
was.
it.
I mean, you didn't get much of her as Marvel, but as the how Supreme Intelligence appears to Carol Danvers, I thought she was awesome and truly, a menacing like character of this artificial intelligence. And I think that scene, that standoff between the two of them, where she takes off the Kree power core that she thinks is what gives her power, but really it's what's holding her powers back. I think that's an awesome scene, and I think people can totally get behind that.
I could see people getting behind that, but then again, the whole movie before that gave me no reason to actually want to like this character of Captain Marvel. So that when she does that, yeah, it might be an awesome moment, but I had no feeling or emotions behind it because she was just so wooden in the movie, and her plight wasn't
You're
that
right.
great.
Now, do you not agree though that I mean, to me, the emotional the character and the emotional story that you get behind in this film is Ben Mendelsohn and
Ben
the
Mendelsohn
Scroll.
is awesome in this
Ben
movie.
Mendelsohn is very awesome in this
I
movie. Yeah,
love everything with Ben Mendelsohn, including Rogue One. I know you don't like Rogue One that much,
yes, that's
but
fair.
I like him in Rogue One. He's cool in
Okay.
that movie. And he's really cool in this show on HBO called The Outsider. He's awesome in that show. But yeah, I love Ben Mendelsohn. And like you said, the scroll twist in this, much like you, I grew up watching like the Avengers movies, and I even watched this little Avengers show that they had for a while. I think it was on Disney or something like that. And there's a big scrolls, and you find out everyone is a scroll in that, kind of like the comics. I think Secret Wars might be something to do with the scrolls, or like something to do with Captain America, like Fallen Empire, or I can't remember. I'm not that great with the comics titles, but I do know the storylines. So, anyways, yeah. But the Skrulls are historically the big, like a big villainous group of aliens in the comics. But in this movie, they made them a likable. You can really feel for them in this movie. So I did feel for them. But that's the thing is like, okay, if they're the villains, you could feel for them. But once you find out they're good, they automatically become the good guys. They're not the villains anymore. And the real villain in this movie is Jude Law, who is
Yes.
completely a statue in this movie. He has nothing likable about him at all. He's so bland.
That's fair. That's definitely fair. That's why I sort of talked about Annette Bening playing Supreme Intelligence as the true villain in this film. Because you're right, Jude Law is very flat in this film. I mean, even from that opening scene in what is it, Hala, where they're fighting the Kree capital, and Veers, Carol Danvers, and Jude Law's character are fighting to train. It's a very flat scene. It's some cool action sequences between the two of them in hand-to-hand combat. But overall, yeah, he is a very flat character, and I think without Samuel L. Jackson on the screen, that Carol Danvers, Brie Larson, is very flat in this film. That being said, I think Samuel L. Jackson in this film is awesome.
I also agree.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
let's talk about the visual effects, Ryan, to de-age him. State of the art.
Well done, extremely, yes. And I mean, I think it does though speak to the acting as well, and the range of Samuel L. Jackson to
Absolutely.
play a younger version of himself, because he really did a great job. I felt like I was watching a Samuel L. Jackson that had played Jules in Pulp Fiction. So I was
Absolutely.
really a big fan of his performance in this film as well. And
They even reference Pulp Fiction in that scene where they're in the car and talking to each other. Same angle as when Jules and Vincent are talking to each other in the car at the beginning of the Pulp
yes,
Fiction. Yeah.
absolutely.
And yeah, go ahead.
Well done by Samuel L. Jackson. No, you go ahead, but
Okay.
definitely just a fantastic performance by him.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So let me talk about the directing for this movie. I found it very like no, they had no style in this movie. I was very excited to see who directed this film. It's a duo of a man and a woman, and
Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck. Yes.
yes, yeah, and they directed a film called Half Nelson, which I haven't seen. I'm gonna watch it. I want to see that film, but everybody praises that movie with Ryan Gosling in it, so I need to go see that movie. But I know that a lot of people were excited because I had heard they made that Half Nelson movie, and I thought, oh, now they're gonna get a big shot with a big budget blockbuster movie, and they might be able to bring some really unique style to this. This feels very generic. Like, I think the biggest criticism that a lot of critics have brought up with it, this feels like a phase one movie. This feels a lot like one of those first movies that come out of the MCU. It doesn't feel like, for example, Civil War or even Winter Soldier, some of those movies in phase two that you liked, Ryan. What was the other ones you liked? Oh, Ant-Man. Ant-Man was an origin story movie. It didn't feel like phase one at all. It felt completely fresh and different from every origin story we've ever seen
I
before.
I can agree with you about
Yeah.
Ant-Man in that case. But to me, this is, with the exception of Ant-Man, this is definitely an origin story that could have fit in phase one.
Yeah.
But I love the origin stories in phase one. What? Incredible Hulk sucked.
Yeah.
But besides that,
Thor.
I don't think I gave an origin story below a 7 out of 10. I thought this was better than Thor. I can definitely say that without a doubt.
Definitely
I
better
thought
than
it was
Thor.
better than
Iron
Thor.
Man. You
I
gave
thought
Iron
it was
Man.
I thought it was equal to an Iron Man. I'm pretty sure I gave Iron Man an 8. So this is an 8.5. I give it a step above because of the twist. I love the
Yeah.
twist with the
Okay.
scroll. You're right. Brie Larson flat in this film, but I think the rest of the cast around her was pretty great, and I love the story. I'm sorry, I thought, it's great to find out who this character. This was a needed piece to this is, first of all, to me, the final piece of the Infinity saga, because we
Yeah.
find how the Tesseract originally ended up on Earth,
Yeah.
and then we finish it up with. Hold on, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Let's regroup there.
Here, why don't I take over for a sec? Okay.
Hold on one sec.
Okay, go.
Let me just think of what I was saying, because I completely lost my train of thought there. So we start with the Tesseract, and then I know what I was going to say.
Okay.
Can I jump in? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So this film, we find out how the Tesseract gets to Earth, and then in the end, we also we need to find out who Carol Danvers is, because she plays a big part in Endgame, and the end of Infinity War as well. We have the pager scene. So I think this is an extremely important film, extremely impertinent or pertinent to the saga. Despite a poor performance by our main actress, I think it's a great film altogether. Not great because of that major knock with Brie Larson. So, which is why I give it an 8.5, not an 8. It's better than good, but not a 9. It's not great.
I don't know, dude. I feel like we were talking. I think we had established before 9 was amazing and 8 was great. So I don't know, dude. I feel like if you were to say this was an 8, I'd say okay, maybe even a 7.5. I'd say yeah, that sounds more right. But for me, I don't know. I could see where you're coming from, but so here's two positives I think you might be able to piggyback on with me. The scene where she has the handcuffs on at the beginning and she has to escape the scroll ship. Awesome action scene. She's having to fight without her powers. Really
But even let's jump back. I think even before then, the start of that scene where you have the scrolls working through her mind, and it's almost like they're working, back to another 90s reference, like they're working on an old VCR, rewinding the tape, trying to figure out who this woman is.
Yeah, I never thought about that. That is a good little tip.
Yeah, I think so. Even starting with that scene from there to her fighting, that action scene is awesome. There's some great comedy in it, very Guardians-esque, when the scrolls come at her and she goes, ah! Runs at them. I think that's an awesome scene,
Yeah, that shows a little flash of character there, but then for the rest of the movie, nothing else happens like that.
Yeah, no, you don't need to keep beating that horse, because I agree with you. I'm sorry, you're right.
I know, I'm just pointing it out. That's why I'm giving it such a low score. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then let's talk about the music choices for that kind of almost the final fight. Whereas, I'm just a girl, I thought that was a pretty cool scene too.
No, yeah, definitely. I think the music, I think that's something we can say with all of the MCU films, is that the music choice has been fantastic, especially from phase 2 on.
Mhm.
So I've got no complaints there. Yeah, I'm sorry. I really like this film. I know you
I
disagree with
think
me.
everyone is
I
entitled
think,
to their opinion, Ryan.
yeah, I think this is a great MCU origin story. You're right. You hit the nail on the head there when you said it's an origin story. Could have been made earlier in the MCU, definitely.
Yes.
But I am a big fan of this film.
Okay, cool. I mean, and let me just say this, like as far as like what the directors did with this film, in the next film that they made after this, Endgame, I'm gonna hold off on giving too much details, but once the Russo brothers get their hands on a Marvel character, immediately makes it more awesome, which is what I think happens to Captain Marvel in Endgame. So I just love the Russo brothers. But yeah, the directors in this film did not give it enough style for me. 6.5 out of 10. And as for Ryan, 8.5 out of 10. Okay, so let's move on to number four, Ryan. What is number four for you?
Number four for both of us, I
Yep.
believe, is Ant-Man and the Wasp. So the second installment of Paul Rudd as Scott Lang and as Ant-Man. Third time we'll see him on screen. I guess, yeah. So this will be the third time we'll see him on screen in the MCU because we see him in Ant-Man and we see him in Civil War, uh, and now we see him in Ant-Man and the Wasp. I once again love this film. I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. Uh, I
Whoa.
I think this film was just as good as the original Ant-Man. Uh, I mean, I think there's things that definitely are worse than the original Ant-Man, but the things that are better even it out. I
Oh,
love,
I see.
first of all, I love Ghost as a villain. I think she's awesome.
Me
I
too.
think her story is awesome. I think the graphics they use, the graphic design they use to make her, sort of phase in and out was really well done on
Agree.
screen. I think she was great. I think I like Scott Lang. I like Paul Rudd in this role. I think he was funny. I think the addition of Randall Park as the parole officer, I
He's
think he's
awesome.
awesome in this film.
I love it in
I
this movie.
I have no complaints about this film. I really like it. I know a lot of
Okay.
people didn't. A lot of people were upset with this film because, and I think you agree with them,
Mm.
it took Scott Lang's character down a notch from where he was in the original Ant-Man. But I really like this film. So 9 out of 10
Yeah.
for me. It's still number four on my list. You can see I'm giving some really high scores in these films. I'm very passionate about these last five films. Dom, go ahead with your thoughts on this film.
Okay, so wait, so you gave this one a 9 out of 10?
9 out of 10.
Okay, yeah. So for me, I'm gonna give this one. Let me see what I have here. Oh, I gave this one a 7.5 out of 10. I watched it for the second time. This is one of the few ones I haven't seen that many times. I watched it in theaters. Tried to watch it again. Didn't watch it. Have time to watch it on Netflix. But then recently, this last week, I said, you know what? Let me watch it again. Give it a fair shake. I originally was gonna give this like a 6 out of 10 or like maybe a 6.5, the same as Captain Marvel. This is an enjoyable film. I really
Mhm.
enjoyed this film. There's a few things that I think don't need to be in the movie, and there's a few mistakes that are made with Paul Rudd's character, as you said. Let me touch on that right now.
Okay.
So I think, and the reason I'm kind of softening my opinion on this a little bit is that, like, so people say he kind of becomes a bumbling character in this one. He makes a lot of mistakes in this movie. 100% we can agree with that. He makes some stupid mistakes in this movie. Um, some things like telling Michael Pena's character, I forget what his character's name is, but Michael Pena's character, he tells him where he is in the woods, and then he's able to give that location away. Like, that's just a dumb mistake. And he makes a lot of other weird mistakes, like having the Ant-Man suit and a trophy and stuff like that. Like, sure, it's funny, but I feel like in the first Ant-Man, he was shown as this smart, intelligent character that was able to break into this highly secure house of Hank Pym. And he's very clever with his skills. He has
Yes.
a specific skill set that he enables when he goes on a heist,
Hmm.
and that's why I liked about him. That was endearing. In this movie, they dumb him down a little bit, but I do have to say he's hilarious in this movie. I think he's
Yes, he
very,
is.
very good in this movie, and the connection between him and Evangeline Lilly in this movie, who has a major role, which I love,
Hmm. Yeah.
great. Him and Hank Pym's character and chemistry, great. I love the play off of them. So I'm not going to mark this down for Paul Rudd as so much in this movie, but I am going to mark it down for, I don't know if you know this actor's name. His name is Walter Goggins, but
Hmm.
he's Sonny Birch in this movie.
No, yeah, I
Yeah,
think we can agree on this film. Yeah, Sonny Birch. So he's kind of a unnecessary villain, but to me, he's the one who sort of sparks everything. That opening
he's a
scene.
roadblock.
Yeah, absolutely. But
Yeah,
I don't think a lot of
that's
the
it.
events would have happened in this film if it weren't for Sonny Birch.
And that's a misstep in writing. You can't have
Okay.
that there. It has to happen more naturally. He's just there to be a roadblock block for things to happen in the action. So,
Okay,
but
I agree with
yeah,
that. Yeah, no, he is unnecessary. He's you know, you want to use the word mustache twirler, I know,
yeah,
and that purely defines him. He is,
yep,
I mean, this is a guy who's has no powers, and yet, you know, they make out in Civil War Ant-Man and, you know, now we have Wasp to be super, you know, pretty powerful. They're
hmm
standing up to the Avengers, and yet they struggle to deal with this guy and his goons who are just
right,
regular guys. You're right.
yeah. So that's the one major negative. So I knocked this one down like a point for Walter Goggins being kind of useless in this movie, just to give him more of a roadblock in the way. But then the other half point I knocked this one, or another point or so I knocked it down for, was Michelle Pfeiffer in this movie. She's good in this movie. I thought she did a fine job acting, but her powers at the end are completely left unexplained. Why is she able to just rescue Ghost at the end of this movie? And then even then, they even backtrack a little bit, because at the end of the movie, they have to have Ant-Man in the quantum realm, so they send him in the quantum realm to help Ghost even more. But I thought she cured her at the end. They just leave this all unexplained, and the only explanation they give is, oh, she says the quantum realm works differently than everywhere
Yes.
else.
No, you are
Yeah,
correct. I think there is another Ant-Man film coming out, correct?
right.
Still,
Which they might explain.
so I think it'll be touched on more in this film. But you know, we're talking about the end of this film now. How chilling is the end of this film, where you have Paul Rudd, you have Scott Lang in the quantum realm, and then
Post-credit
you
scene.
have,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it is truly a chilling scene where he's
Which kind of
stuck there.
it just builds on what we loved of Infinity War,
Hmm.
but the rest of the film is a very light, funny movie,
Yeah.
not much dark happening, and that's why I really do like that post-credit scene. I agree with you there, Ryan. It brings in that depth that we're, oh, Infinity War is a thing, yeah. So
Yeah, because I spent this entire film when I watched it in the theaters thinking, at what point on the timeline does this take place?
exactly.
Has Thanos already snapped his fingers? Or, you know, maybe the world is oblivious to Thanos snapping his fingers. Like, what's going on here? So to see it, you know, tied in at the very end, and you're right, because if that happened in the middle of this film, I think it would have killed the film. This was a lighthearted film, as you said.
Mhm.
So to throw that in the end credit scene, I think was a fantastic, or the post credit scene, beg
Yes.
your pardon, was a fantastic choice. So I'm a big fan of this film. I'm a big fan of the Ant-Man series, one of my favorites in the MCU. So that's why I
Me
give
too.
this a 9 out of 10. But I can totally understand where you're coming from there, giving this film a lower score. It makes sense, and I think a lot of MCU fans would agree with you there. And
Yeah.
7.5 is a very respectable score.
Absolutely, yeah. And like you said, I think maybe we didn't touch on Lawrence Fishburne and Ghost, their
Yeah.
chemistry in this movie. I felt a lot for their characters. As far
Oh,
as villains
absolutely,
go,
yeah,
I could get behind them. I
yeah.
I liked that part of this movie.
Yeah, there's a
So
great
yeah,
emotional connection with that villain. You know, what we lack when we call a villain a mustache twirler, we don't have that with the Lawrence Fishburne and the Ghost character, and especially getting that backstory of Ghost. You know,
yes, very
taking,
heartbreaking.
you know, getting her powers when in the blast that her father dies in is, you know, is a
Yes,
very powerful scene.
yes, I agree. And just I think we should make this the last point. We want to really emphasize this. For me, I don't know if maybe you. I think you might disagree with this, but for me, only second to a few of the other female characters, Evangeline Lilly as the Wasp is one of the strongest female superheroes out there. I think she does the action incredibly well in this
Oh yeah.
movie. I was way behind the whole movie. All she wants to do is save her mother. And I was so behind her this whole movie. I was like, yes, go, go, go. And she's like, she's trying to do everything in her power to get her mother back. And I could really get behind her. Whereas in the first movie, you're kind of more behind Scott Lang and
Hmm.
his plight to get back with his daughter. In this movie, he has the same plight to get back with his daughter, to not, do bad in his daughter's eyes. But I felt more for Evangeline Lilly, which is why her name is in the title, The Wasp.
Yes.
And this
Yeah.
was more of a Wasp movie, which I liked. I liked her in this movie a lot.
Plus, not to mention, her action scenes are awesome.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
that scene in the kitchen with you know, fighting Sonny Birch's goons, and you know, they throw the
so
knife at
cool,
her and she shrinks down. She runs on the blade of the knife. So cool.
so
There's
awesome.
some
Yeah.
awesome action sequences in this film, and I think you know, being Ant-Man and the Wasp, it has the ability to do that. The shrinking and growing up, you know, the car chase scenes where they shrink down the car underneath the car and then enlarge it and blow up the car from underneath. I think it's awesome. So yeah, this is a great film as far as I'm concerned. 9 out of 10 for me.
Okay, yeah, and a 7.5 for me. So then let's move on to number three, Ryan. We're gonna do Spider-Man: Far From Home. Um, Spider-Man: Far From Home came out. It's the most recent movie to come out. Uh, it's the sequel to Homecoming, which we both were very positive on. We liked Spider-Man: Homecoming a lot. I think this movie is even better. This movie has an excellent execution of pacing, of story. The characters in this movie are all very likable. The villain in this movie, huge twist. Really great stuff in this movie, Ryan. So for me, I'm going to give my score, then you go right ahead.
Yep.
I'm giving this one a 9.5 out of 10.
Couldn't agree more with you. 9.5 out of 10 from me as well. This film is amazing. And, I think what makes this film amazing is the villain. I think Mysterio, played by it's Jake Gyllenhaal, correct?
Correct.
Is incredible.
Love
His
Jake
backstory,
Gyllenhaal.
which, mind you, we find out with that twist about halfway through the film, is amazing. Jumping back though, I think the graphics and the fight scenes with the elementals are awesome.
Yeah.
I love this film. I think the one thing that hurts the film is there are some corny scenes, and we talked about how Far From Home was a high school movie. There are some corny scenes here, high school movie-esque, where Peter Parker is pining after MJ, which slow it down a little bit, but all
That's
in all,
endearing to me, though. I like that adds to this movie. It's so endearing. Like I said with Homecoming, it's so great of a high school movie. It's also Spider-Man.
But then you have, I thought it got a little too campy. You have what's his name?
Talking about his best friend?
No. So I know Ned. No,
Okay.
the guy who was not in the blip, so he's aged, so they're used to him being an 8-year-old. He's the one who's hitting on MJ.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I thought that was a little ridiculous. Looking for his name right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of relationship stuff in this movie, like which I think is hilarious. Like Ned and his girlfriend, like how they just become girlfriends for just with one time, and it's so hilarious.
Yeah, they're seen at the airport at the end of the film. Oh, we're not together anymore. Yeah. We're just friends. No, this is I can find very little wrong with this film, except for towards the beginning I thought it was a bit over the top, the Peter sort of pining for MJ, but otherwise the action in this film is awesome. The villain is so menacing. How about that scene? Well, I love his ability, all the projectors and the augmented reality.
The virtual effects, at this
point. And
the
scene where you have where gets Tony Stark coming out of the grave. Oh man,
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
there are so many. That scene, the scene that sticks with me, and I think it was all the same scene where he eventually gets Peter Parker to back into the train. That is just so amazing, so nightmarish. It's incredible and incredibly done too. With you have the dialogue while all the visual effects are going on, given by Jake Gyllenhaal. Really, really chilling scene. Makes you really start to think more of Spider-Man as a serious character, not just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more there. Yeah, when we heard that Mysterio was going to be the villain in this movie, I had a set of expectations for what Mysterio should, what they could do with Mysterio. And this is one of those cases where the people behind the virtual effects in this movie completely delivered on everything I thought that it should be like. Just seeing everything that Mysterio does with Peter's mind and his perception of reality in this movie, straight out of the comics, just like I wanted it to be plucked out of there, perfect. So I thought that was a very strong aspect of this movie. And I think that, once again, we got to say it, Tom Holland is excellent as Spider-Man.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. He is really great in this film as Spider-Man, and growing to like him as Peter Parker as well. He has a little more of a dark edge in this film because of the death of Tony Stark. It almost acts as our Tobey Maguire's death of Uncle Ben.
Yes.
So he has a darker edge, and it sort of turns him into more of a hero, which I really like in this case. So big fan of Tom Holland's performance in this film. Want to jump to one of the things, my favorite part of this film, and why I'm so excited to get Phase 4 underway. How about the post-credit scene, J.K. Simmons reprising his role as J. Jonah Jameson, and the world finds out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and you have the doctored film from Mysterio's suit that Spider-Man killed him and Spider-Man's evil, and he's just in the middle of it's New York City with MJ.
Yep.
How amazing is that, and how excited does that get you for the next Spider-Man film?
Huge smile on my face when I saw that. People were clapping in the theater, thunderous applause. I mean, let's talk about that. Sam Raimi did an excellent job as casting J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. He's perfect casting for that role. And I mean, to see him back in the Spider-Man movie, I was absolutely delighted. and the twist at the end that everyone's might know who Peter Parker is at the end. Very great twist. Um, John Watts again directed this film, and he did a great job in this film. I feel like there was a few scenes that didn't need to be there in Homecoming, like I mentioned with the cameos in the one episode we talked about it last time. I think that in this film, Peter Parker is always facing a problem. He's always got something to do in this movie. He's always constantly being hit with things like he has to juggle. This is the best part about the Spider-Man character. He has to juggle being a high school kid, having to deal with MJ and holding a secret identity, keeping his friends safe, while also dealing with dangers in the world as Spider-Man. He has to juggle those two lives. That's what's so great about Spider-Man. And once again, that's what could be great in the third film in this movie, where that's all shattered. People are going to know his secret identity. People are going to know who he is. That's going to be his life is shattered. So there's lots of potential there for the third film. But this film did a great job of having him juggle all those aspects and try to, and eventually he does tell MJ that he's Spider-Man because he's pushed to the brink so much that he just has to tell her.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it ends up being, I guess you could say, his fatal flaw. I mean, we'll see how it goes in the world of Spider-Man, but we see, his secret identity revealed. And I think that's what makes Spider-Man unique in the MCU. Not many heroes have secret identities in the MCU. Right. Most people understand who is who. I guess Scott Lang still sort of has a secret persona. People don't know that he's Ant-Man. But otherwise, Thor is Thor. People get that. Tony Stark is Iron Man. Steve Rogers is Captain America. Right. So it adds an edge definitely to Peter Parker. And I'm really, like I said, I'm super excited to see where they go with this film. Was really, really pleased with this film as a sequel. And not much more I can say about this. 9.5 out of 10 for me, 9.5 out of 10 for you. So now we're going to move on. I think we can both safely say that the next two films we're going to talk about are 10 out of 10s, both Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, true masterpieces of cinema. Now, I know you and I diverge a little bit on what's number one and what's number two. So I think now we'll go back to our chronological order. We'll talk about Infinity War first, then talk about Endgame, and we'll talk, a little bit about why we like one or the other better. So do you want to start it off with Infinity War, Dom?
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to put Infinity War as number 2 on my list. This is a 10 out of 10. We both think these are 10 out of 10 movies, masterpieces. Like you said, Ryan, you couldn't have put it better myself. Infinity War, I'm going to have to there's only way I could bring these together in my mind is that these are two different subgenres of film. Infinity War is like an action thriller with sprinklets of drama in there that we have big dramatic moments, but it's a focus on action. Whereas Endgame the focus was, yes, we're going to have action, but we're going to save the big moments for the end, or towards the middle of the movie. And the first part of Endgame is let's, bank in on the dramatic moments, the emotion. It's all about the emotion. So like Infinity War is an action thriller with sprinklets of drama, whereas an Endgame is more of a drama movie with action towards the end. Yeah. If that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. And okay. I think I agree with you. But I think that's why I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to put Infinity War at the top of my list. Yeah. And Endgame just fractions of points beneath it. You want to call it a 9.9999999 versus a 10. To me, I give both these films a 10 out of 10. But I will put Infinity War on top just because, to me, for a superhero movie, what are we looking for? And we talked about this when I was talking with you about Doctor Strange. We're there to see the action. I love the action sequences in Infinity War, and there are so many of them. From the beginning, you have the children of Thanos fighting in New York City with Doctor Strange and Tony Stark. And then you have the fight on the spaceship. Then you have the fight in Wakanda. You've got the fight in London where Thanos' children show up to try and ambush Vision. You have the battle on Titan with Thanos and the Guardians of the Galaxy and Peter Parker and Tony Stark. I mean, there are so many incredible action sequences in this film. And to me, there are some incredibly captivating drama scenes too. I mean, Of course, Thanos snaps his fingers at the end and everyone disappears.
Let's not get to that yet. Let's start. I think the best way we could do this, just since we both love this movie so much, let's just go from the beginning and move through. So
Okay.
I think, okay, so let me say this. I went to go see this movie opening day. I couldn't wait. I had to see this first. I went with one of my buddies from college. You know, you and me were both in different parts of the state at the time, so we couldn't see this one together. But I had to see this one. I went with my buddy that all my other friends were unavailable at this time, but I went with my buddy. He hadn't seen Guardians of the Galaxy. He hadn't seen a few of the other movies like Doctor Strange and all that, but he had seen the other Avengers movies. He says, I want to see Avengers, you know? And he had me on the way we were driving there, and I explained it to him, you know, oh, here's what Guardians is going to be like, you know, and here's what Doctor Strange is about. And I explained it to him. And he's like, okay, he says, I'm afraid I might not like this one as much. But as soon as the lights went down in that theater, everyone in that movie theater was on the same wavelength, it felt like to me, because this movie, from the first second, which I mean is when you see the Marvel Studios logos and you don't hear the music, it's silent, and then you start to hear the distress call from the ship,
Yeah,
Asgardian
the
ship.
Asgardian refugee ship. Yep.
You could tell. As I was sat in the theater, I thought, "Oh crap, this one is different than everything else that came before. This is going to be an incredible movie." And from the first scene, Heimdall dies in the first few seconds of this movie. Loki dies in the first few seconds of this movie. I was like, "Oh my gosh, they're going for it right now,
Mm-hmm.
all the way." I mean, and then you get to see what many fans, including one of my closest friends from college, Hunter, he was expecting. He's a huge Hulk fan. He was expecting to see Hulk beat the crap out of Thanos, and in this first scene, subverting all of our expectations, Thanos totally destroys the Hulk, knocks him out on his face on the ground, just showing how powerful Thanos is. And that brings me into my big point in this movie. Thanos, one of, if not the best comic book villains ever put to screen.
Absolutely. And Josh Brolin, correct?
Correct.
I think does a fantastic job sort of personifying Thanos. And you know, you learn so much about Thanos in this film. You learn his reasons, what he's doing, why he wants all the Infinity Stones. And you know, I think that's hard to do. It would be difficult to do for any director in just one film, but I think they do an amazing job here. You get his backstory with Gamora, and you know what, you know, balance. You have the scene with the two-sided pocket knife, or switchblade, I should say. I think he does an incredible job here because he's a villain. But once again, we talked about it with a lot of our villains. You know, it's great when we can understand a villain's mindset and there's an emotional tie to them. We understand what Thanos' reasoning is. And I think we see it even more. And I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit here.
Yeah.
When we're on Titan and Thanos uses the reality stone to show what his world was like and then to see it destroyed. So
Great character development there.
Yeah, I think we start to learn a lot more about Thanos, and he's just this big bad guy, angry Titan. You know, we learn what Thanos is. It humanizes him a little bit, which is
Yes.
huge in this film, and I think helps a lot with our development.
Yeah, and while you're talking about the humanization of Thanos, I mean, I was behind this, you know, at the beginning. He has some great lines in this movie, destiny will arrive, or should I say, I have. You know, some great dialogue that they're giving to him. But, you know, he's kind of just this awesome dude. You know, we're all scared of him. I felt, you know, actual fear in the theater whenever he took the screen. And eventually, like, we'll move a little bit forward ahead when he goes to Vormir to get the Soul Stone, and, you know, Gamora is captured and with him. And at that point, you know, I could understand I was behind his motives. But what really drove me through was one of the few villains we get to see cry on screen. He sheds tears for having to kill his own daughter. And for me, that was so heartbreaking. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is a really deep, complex character.
And if I'm not mistaken, we see it twice because we see it there and we also see it when Mantis grabs him on Titan when there's that battle between the Guardians of the Galaxy and Stark and Peter Parker.
Correct.
And Thanos. So we see it twice, yeah, and we truly do see an emotional tie with Thanos. And even again, when he snaps his fingers, you know, when baby Gamora comes to him and says, "Was it worth it?" You know, that, you know, there's truly
what did it cost?
Yeah, so much great emotional depth with our villain in this film. But once again, we've talked about the emotional in this film. We've talked about the action scenes, and yet somehow the Russo brothers do it. And I think, you know, they have the assistance of James Gunn and others. There's some awesome comedy in this film as well. Yes. It's amazing how they do it, how they pack so much into this film. I mean, how about the scenes between Thor and Star-Lord on the ship? I think those are some of the
Why are you
funniest
imitating
scenes.
my voice?
Yes.
I'm not imitating your voice. You are.
Yeah.
And how about this, Ryan? Moving so incredibly slow.
You can't.
You didn't know where I was going for that, huh?
I had no idea where you're going. That is a fantastic. How about even no? Honestly, I don't think I laughed harder in the film than when there's a conversation. Groot says, "I am Groot," and Thor goes, "Oh yes, I agree," and they goes, "You speak Groot?" "Yes, I took it as an elective in high school." I love that. I think a lot of people miss that line. I thought that was one of the funniest things said in the entire MCU.
I love that line as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I think there is nothing wrong I can find in
me
this film.
neither.
You know what? I will say one thing, and I'm going to knock it even more in Endgame. The one thing that hurts me in this film, and I've talked to it about Doctor Strange, and I've talked to you with it in other films, I don't like the manipulation of time in film. I find it very much what is it, Deus Ex Machina sort of
Oh, I see what you're saying.
component.
Mhm.
You know, they destroyed the Mind Stone. I understand we need a reason for Thanos to be able to get the stone, but I don't like that he's just able to use the Time Stone to turn back time. That kind of upsets me.
Okay, yeah, I could see why you say that, but I mean, it's explained earlier with in Doctor Strange how
Yeah,
it works. So it didn't bother me as much.
yeah,
Um,
and I think that's a problem with me in not just the MCU films, but any film that utilizes time travel.
yeah, I can see where you're coming from. So let's break this one down for at the final points in this one. So let's break it down by group. We loved everything that happened with Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy. You know,
Yes.
them and their mission.
I will say, you know what, jumping back, I will say there were some slow scenes with Peter Dinklage's character in this film. That's my one
Oh, I
knock
love that part.
on.
I
I
love that
thought it
he's a
was a little.
giant in this movie.
Well, I do love that, but I will say I thought the scenes where we're trying to make the axe were a little bit slow.
Yeah, but they're building. Let's talk about that when they're making the axe and some great lines like "That'll kill you." And he says, "Only if I die." That's what killing you means. I love when he says that, and then he makes the axe. And let's talk about okay. So everyone gets an excellent entrance in this movie. When we first see Iron Man suit up, great moment. He has the nano suit, so it's building all around him, and then he takes out those huge blasters and blasts that dude. Everyone was cheering in the theater then, and then the awesome musical cue when Captain America, the train goes by, throws the spear at him, catches the spear, and then da 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 da, and then they play it. That's so cool. I was like, everyone was so
Yes.
happy.
How
And
about
then
the intro to Spider-Man in this film, where
Spider-Man is great.
he's incredible in the intro too. We get the Spider-Man music when he sees the alien ship and he's on the school bus. Ned, I need you to cover for me. Whoa, an alien spaceship!
We're all gonna die.
Yeah. Uh,
I love that part.
and Stan Lee's in that too. Well,
Yeah,
I'm sure it's CGI Stan Lee because he had already passed away. Correct? Or
he passed away after this.
oh, you're right. So that was actually what you kids have never seen a spaceship before.
Yeah, I love that
Yeah,
part.
such an awesome line.
And then let's talk, but yeah, so back to what I was going to say is that I think that Thor gets the most satisfying arrival in this movie when he finally gets Stormbreaker and the
Yeah.
music is building, and then you see him just go for it and it starts spinning. And then boom, the Bifrost comes down in Wakanda, and the axe goes through and just starts spinning and killing everybody. And then him and Rocket and Groot show up, and it bomb, 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 bomb. Everyone was cheering in my theater. Everyone loved that
Without a
part.
doubt, the greatest, I would say, on screen war scene that you will ever see. I know there are some really awesome ones. Of course, Saving Private Ryan, the D-Day scene comes to mind. So that's an awesome scene. There's some great battle scenes in the film Troy as well, or 300. But I would say this is the greatest massive war battle scene on cinema.
Wow, yeah, I could agree with you on that almost, except for I'll touch on what I think about the other massive scene in Endgame later, but let's uh let's see what so I mean Thor saying bring me Thanos. I love that part too, and I think we should while we're talking about Thor, let's talk about his character arc in this movie. He has a heartbreaking character arc in this movie, building on everything we got to see in Ragnarok, right? He's lost everything. he feels like, Thanos is going to be just a long line, and it builds up to what he's going to be like in Endgame. Thor is also awesome in Endgame. But, everything that do with Thor in this movie and having to, fight Thanos and lose it first, it's the first time he's lost, really. He's not the most powerful being as far as he thinks he is. He's supposed to be the king of Asgard, the most powerful god of thunder, But what do you think about Thor?
Yeah, Thor's arc is great in this. Is great, really. Thor to me has the greatest story arc, minus Tony Stark, of course, in the MCU. I think from Thor through Thor: The Dark World, Ragnarok. I mean, seeing him in Avengers and Avengers 2, and then ending up with where he is at the end of Endgame, which we'll touch on a little bit later. He, minus Tony Stark, has the greatest story arc and the greatest area of maturity, I think, of any MCU character. We do see it a little bit more from Tony Stark, and we'll talk about that more in Endgame, but I think he is incredible in this film and even better at Endgame.
Yeah, I agree. And while you mentioned Tony, let's talk about his place in Infinity War. The chemistry between him and Doctor Strange, I liked the kind of, relationship they built with each other. It was just a professional thing. They didn't like each other. He calls him a douchebag at one point. So I like that point. And I also like the building more on what happened in the previous films, Peter Parker and Tony Stark. That kind of relationship there. Is this your ward? I like that part where Doctor Strange mentions that.
Yeah.
And how about when Peter Parker meets Doctor Strange? You remember that part, Ryan?
Oh, I didn't realize we were using our hero name. Sorry, I'm Spider-Man.
I love that part.
Yeah.
So we like that part. And let's talk about that battle. What do you have to say about that battle on Titan with Thanos?
That is such a cool scene. I love the use of Doctor Strange. Finally, Doctor Strange does something cool besides spinning his hands.
Full power Doctor Strange.
I love Spider-Man in that.
Yep.
Once again, a great balance of action and comedy where he's going through the portal, just sort of beating up, these little punches.
Magic with a punch. Magic with a kick.
Yes. It was honestly, that is an awesome scene. And then you have the Guardians too. I think the Guardians are awesome in this film. Mm-hmm. So no, that's a cool scene as well. I have no problem with any. Like I said, I stated my one small problem with the time travel and a little bit of this pacing issue, making Stormbreaker. But otherwise, I cannot find any major problems with this film. I think just about every scene in this film is a masterpiece on screen.
Yeah, and I pretty much agree too. One thing that is most notably a weak point that people have pointed out to me is that Cap doesn't get that much in this movie. He gets a few great scenes, but there's not that much behind his character. But now let's just cap this off with the final battle in Wakanda, Captain America and the Avengers all coming together on Wakanda with Black Panther and all the characters we got to meet in that film. And probably what I would say is the greatest, most shocking twist moment at the end when Thanos actually wins. He does exactly what he said in this film. He snaps his fingers and deletes half the universe.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what makes him a great villain. He had a plan, he executed it, and just what he said after he would do the snap, he would finally get to rest and look upon a grateful universe, and that's the final scene in this movie. And the absolutely heartbreaking score, the violence or cello playing the tune at the end, where everyone is just in complete shock, and then the stale white credits. At the end of every Marvel movie, we get used to having these really colorful, awesome credits, lots of great artwork, even some concept art sometimes. But at the end of this movie, it's just black and white, black background, white text, and then Avengers Infinity War, and it kind of disappears just like everything else. I was completely crushed at the end of this movie, Ryan.
No, I agree with you. And I think we didn't see it coming. That was the amazing thing. We see Thor get to Thanos with Stormbreaker, hit him right in the chest, and we think that's it. The Avengers succeeded. How are we going to go for the next Avengers film? And then that line yeah. And then you have the snap and just the score, or lack thereof, I should say, during the snap. And you have at the end that heartbreaking scene with Peter Parker in Tony Stark's lap. I mean,
I don't want to die.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one to watch. I'll admit, I cried during that scene, seeing Peter Parker die.
I can say without a doubt, that Avengers Infinity War was the first Avengers film that made me cry. or the
Yeah.
first superhero film, I should say.
Yeah, it's really a heartbreaking scene, and I don't know. I just thought this was such a revolutionary film. I think we can agree on
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, this is number one on my list. I
Yeah.
know it's number two on your list. So why don't you dive in with Endgame, which is number one, top of your list?
Yep. Avengers Endgame. Uh, number one on my list. 10 out of 10. This is a film that they had been building towards for 10 plus years. Probably I would think it was 11 years at this point. They had been building from all the way from Iron Man 1. And let's talk about the main thing in this movie. This is the capstone for Tony Stark's character. If you were going to break this down into one thing, one beat, all these 23 films to come out, you could say from Iron Man 1 to Avengers Endgame, and even Far From Home, you can include that as well. It's the story of Tony Stark learning to become the guy that would only sacrifice for himself to being the guy that would make the selfless sacrifice. And that's exactly what he does at the end of this film. This is all about Tony Stark's growth. And, he has to make the sacrifice. He has a child in this movie, and he learns, no, I have to sacrifice my personal family and my personal happiness to save the rest of the universe. And some of the lines in this movie are so freaking incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to say, at the end when he snaps his fingers, and I am Iron Man. Boom. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, these guys are incredible writers, directors. Everyone is delivering.
Yeah.
A lot of, I will say, people say the first act of this movie is slow. I thoroughly disagree because we had been waiting to see, we had two movies in between Infinity War and Endgame. What has been happening?
Yeah.
What was the fallout of Thanos' snap? And we get to see the emotional impact that it had on Captain America and Thor, and even before the 5-year time jump, you get to see Thor he feels like he's actually failed, and of course he did fail. He didn't go for the head, and he eventually does when they find Thanos. Captain Marvel's so awesome. She's like, I'm going to kill Thanos. I'll be back. And then they go and want to fight him, but it turns out that he destroyed the stones with the stones, and Thor goes for the head and chops off his head, and that's kind of the loss of the superhero mentality we've had for these last few movies. Once again, Infinity War felt different from the first second. Endgame, it felt like this was going to be a different movie as well. It had its specific stylistic and emotional feel to it than the other films.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with you. There is definitely, from the minute one, yes, it is slower film, but you have that dramatic aspect, the fallout of what happened with Thanos first, with Tony Stark. I mean, you have that heartbreaking final transmission he thinks that he's giving to Pepper Potts, because he and Nebula are just drifting away in space after the Battle of Titan before Captain Marvel comes and saves them. And then, they do eventually get to Thanos, but then you have the 5-year jump, and you have Captain America who's leading these support groups of what happened after the blip, and you have, even you see characters like Rocket. I believe it's Rocket, right? Who is in the transmission with Captain Marvel, and you see his his character matured. It's a much more somber tone than any of the MCU films we've seen before. The fallout until we see Scott Lang, come back and knocking on the door of the Avengers compound. So I think this film definitely has a slow intro, and I don't think that hurts it at all. Now, to me, why I rank this film a little bit lower, and I think this is hard to say because it's a long film, but it felt like it was a bit rushed. I feel like when we get to I feel like, first of all, the discovery of time travel was too easy for Tony Stark. I'm going to say that. Once again, my problems with time travel. I don't think I can, fault this movie for it, because there was no other way to really touch on this subject and how they were going to bounce back after the blip. But I think he discovers it too quickly, and then I think because you have so many scenes going on at once, you have traveling back to Asgard, you have traveling back to New York City after Loki gets away with the first Tesseract, traveling back and Tony Stark meeting Howard Stark in the compound in New Jersey, the Hydra / Shield facility. I think there are just a lot of scenes here that I wish we could have spent more time on. And I know they couldn't have. I understand that. This film was so full and complete when it was made that they couldn't have done any more with it. But there was just, it left me almost wishing that they had broken this down into 3 movies.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It didn't feel that rushed to me. I mean, they did make a 3.5 hour or 4 hour
Yeah.
long cut. I think I've read somewhere online that they did
Yeah.
have a cut that long, but they had to cut
Right.
it down.
And that's why I still give this film a 10 out of 10, you know. I can't knock it points for that because
Right.
this film was a 3-hour film, if I'm not mistaken, or
Yep.
upwards near that. So I can't knock it a point for that. But that's the one thing that I would say. I felt like I left the theater of Infinity War satisfied.
Hmm.
Every one of my questions was answered except for the fact of what's happening next. I feel like I wanted to see more happen in this film, which is hard to do, making a film
Yeah.
longer than 3 hours.
I don't know, man.
But I still love this film. I still give
Yeah.
it a 10 out of 10. But I just liked Infinity War a little bit more.
Okay, I can see where you're coming from. Let's talk about this from more of a film aspect. The performances in this movie are pretty awesome. Scarlett Johansson, the main cast: Scarlett Johansson, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr. I think Robert Downey Jr. is Oscar worthy in this movie. He's so great.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah. What do you think about the main Avengers cast? Even let's. I mean, I know you've been waiting. Everybody at home's been waiting. Let's talk about Hawkeye in this movie.
He finally is worthy of top billing in this film.
Okay, cool.
I mean, he has the opening scene with his family.
Yep.
And that, from minute one, truly heartbreaking. I mean, we see Clint Barton seemingly finally with his family, happy on his own, because he is really a character that seems to struggle with that. It's sort of a dark, brooding character. He's happy. He's with his family. He's with his wife and kids. He stepped back from being an Avenger to be a father. And with the snap of Thanos' fingers, it's gone.
Yep.
And we see him come full circle then when we get to Vormir and he's ready to sacrifice himself for Scarlett Johansson and she won't let him. That battle, you want to talk about an emotional battle scene, the two battling over which one dies and which one stays alive. I mean, he has truly become a soul of darkness, and for a reason. Finally, I think Hawkeye becomes a hero in this film,
Cool.
which I would have never said before that because he's useless. I don't like Hawkeye. We've been over this. We went over this last film.
All right,
last
fine.
episode.
All right, fine. No, I think he's cool in this movie too. So yeah, and I mean Scarlett Johansson is also excellent in this movie. Very heartbreaking character arc. Didn't see her death coming at all. I didn't know what would happen, but once they landed on Vormir, I thought, oh crap, one of these guys isn't going to make it out. And they're great. Let's move on to Bruce Banner in this movie. What the character developments he's had.
Oh man, I think Bruce Banner in this film he's not really Bruce Banner as far as I'm concerned. Mark Ruffalo goes full Hulk in this film.
Yep.
And once again, you know, like Tony Stark, a character who realizes the greater good. And I think that's truly amazing. I mean, he's the first one who's, ready to bring back everyone. He's the first one to bear the gauntlet because of the gamma radiation he's taken. But really the maturity of him to, finally be able to control the Hulk and Bruce Banner into one, I think is awesome. I think he brings some great comedic aspects into this film as well. Nobody saw that coming, I don't think.
Nope, nobody did.
So it was really, really neat to see that storyline sort of come to a head there. And I loved how Mark Ruffalo played it.
Me too. And I think that it was a deep part to his character is when he finally looks at that Infinity Gauntlet that Tony Stark has created, and he says the radiation is mostly gamma. He's like, it's like I was made for this. Like his whole life, he thinks that this is the moment. I thought that was very deep, and even for a character that hasn't been given that much depth, except for a little bit in the past movies, he's definitely a side character, not a main character.
Yep.
But yeah, and then let's move on now to Captain America's plight in this movie, and Chris Evans. I think he does an excellent performance in this movie.
He does. You're right. I think Captain America serving as a voice of reason to those who survived is pretty amazing. And then I love the lines given and the conversation between him and Tony when we see Tony with his family post-blip with his daughter and with Pepper. and him urging him to come back to help them so that they can undo all of this. And you see once again that juxtaposition between Steve Rogers and Tony Stark. Tony Stark, who's sort of worried about his own time, his own family, versus Steve Rogers, always worrying about the greater good. But we see them there coming together, and I think a rather fitting end for him as well in this film. Not hopefully everyone's seen it, but not to give too many spoilers, but definitely a fitting end for Steve Rogers, something that he definitely deserved.
Yeah, I could definitely agree. I had a feeling that it would end with him getting back that dance with Agent Carter. So I thought that was a great tone. A great way to end the movie. And I mean, what else can we say about Captain America in this movie? He's pretty awesome. I can't think of anything else. I had a whole thing built up, but I can't remember it right now.
You have the scene where Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, and Thor are battling Thanos.
Mm-hmm.
One of the definitely in these films the coolest hand-to-hand scene, I would say. Not the most emotional, like I said. That goes to Clint Barton and Natasha Romanoff on Vormir, but definitely an awesome action sequence there where you have the four of them duking it out.
Yeah. Did we talk about the time travel sequence in this movie? And I love how this movie is broken up into 3 acts. The first act is the fallout and everything leading up to almost knocked over Groot, dude. Okay, he's good. So then we have that first act, and then it stops, and the second act starts right when they go and time travel for the first time. That's Act 2, when they have this huge time travel sequence. And then the second that the Hulk snaps his fingers is when Act 3 starts, and the rain comes down on the Avengers facility, and the final battle begins. Yeah. I think that I love the transition between those 3 arcs. It was executed perfectly.
Exactly.
I loved Captain America fighting himself. That's what I was trying to think of earlier. Is Captain America
such a cool
himself.
Scene?
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that part. And
during the time travel sequence. Yep.
Yeah, and him being in the elevator with all those people, call back to the Winter Soldier scene we love so much. But him knowing from the future and using his future knowledge, he says "Hail Hydra," and that's how he's able to get out of that elevator. Same thing, he's able to get out of the fight with himself in the past by saying, Bucky's alive. And that kind of stuns the old Captain America for a while. And, I love how kind of irritated he is with his old self. I could do this all day. I know. I like that he says that.
Yeah. No, that is an awesome scene as well, though, with him going back with the elevator scene. Definitely a great sequence there leading up to the battle between Steve Rogers and Steve Rogers.
Yeah. And I mean, even the other minor characters in this movie get a great arc. Like you said, Scott Lang gets a great arc in this movie. War Machine gets a great arc in this movie, as well as Nebula becomes a very central character in this movie. I mean, there's lots of emotion behind them. I love the interaction between War Machine and Nebula when they're on Morag trying to get the Power Stone. And he says, hey, we all work with what we got. Yeah, I wasn't always like this either, because they're both kind of machines now. Because
absolutely, yeah.
I love that aspect of this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say of the time travel, because you just reminded me of it, the time travel sequences, the 3. So we have Asgard to get the ether. We've got the scene where they go back to New York City in the events of Avengers, the original Avengers. The Morag scene I found to be somewhat slow. I honestly, until you had brought it up there, I could not remember what the third area of time travel was. So I thought that scene was a little bit slow with War Machine and Nebula going back to go get, what was that, the Power Stone, correct? Before the events of the first Guardians of the Galaxy. Yes.
Yeah, I agree, man. It is a little slow, but I enjoy it. Let's talk about how Tony Stark fails in this movie to get the Tesseract. So him and Steve Rogers go back to 1970s. We get our Stan Lee cameo. They de-age him, and he looks a little bit younger, and that was pretty awesome too. But what for me was showing me that Tony Stark / Robert Downey Jr. was giving an amazing performance and character arc in this movie was him meeting his father in the past. Truly an impactful scene for me, seeing, the difference between him and his father, but also what he's learned from his father. And kind of, it was a nice way to wrap up his growth.
Absolutely, because all we hear about is his dislike for his father for the most part. We see a lot of that, or hear a lot of that in Captain. Try it on the third time. Iron Man 2.
Hmm.
So being able to have Tony Stark see that his father wasn't truly, this terrible father, and having them share that moment finally is really a powerful scene.
Yeah, I agree. And then let's wrap this all up. They get back, they have the Infinity Stones, and Thanos also makes back through the help of the past Nebula, and they snap their fingers. Hulk snaps his fingers, and Thanos immediately destroys the Avengers facility. And as we talked about, our three main heroes, the ones we started it all with, we started with Iron Man, then we went Thor and Captain America. The big three have an awesome battle with Thanos here, and Captain America keeps duking it out, but Thanos is too much of an awesome dude. He's too much of a badass. Fights him, cutting him up, and uh, he almost is killing Thor. But thankfully, Captain America saves him by picking up Thor's hammer, which I
Finally,
thought was
yes.
so cool. Oh
So
my
cool.
gosh, that was so great.
Yeah.
And I love the music build up to that too. And then he picks it up and he's slamming him and using the lightning powers and everything. And let's talk about what I think is a very great representation in this movie is how the whole Thanos' army is up there, and Captain America, the one man that can stand against them, is just him versus this barrage of enemies, and he's just standing there with his broken shield. He won't give up no matter what. I was cheering in the theater. That's Captain America.
Yeah.
He tightens the shield and he goes, and he's about to stand against them until it's his last breath. I thought that was such a Captain America moment.
Oh, it was. Yep. And luckily we know what happens next.
Yeah, what happens next, Ryan?
Yeah, on your left.
On your left. We love
Uh,
that part.
I know you're gonna argue that this scene was cooler than the scene we had on Wakanda.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hear your points on it because I strongly disagree. I thought this was a cool battle sequence, definitely, but I felt like almost with this one we had too much success for the Avengers. It was too easy for them. The first time it was truly a struggle. This
Yeah,
time I feel
I can
like
feel
for the
that.
most part, we saw the Avengers kicking butt, especially at the point that Captain Marvel shows up.
I could totally agree with you on that part. It was definitely, you could feel like they were struggling to win in Wakanda in Infinity War. And this one, the whole movie had been building this momentum to them winning, and this is when they finally can win. And
Hmm.
I mean, I was I was like tearing up in the theater when we finally get everyone together, a great visual representation, all the portals opening,
Yep.
all the different worlds opening, all the movies coming through to this one moment, every character we've grown to love coming through and walking through, and then everyone lining up, and Captain America. I know you think it's cheesy, but finally getting to say, Avengers, assemble. Bum, 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 bum. That's such a cool shot. I love that
It
part.
is an awesome shot. You're absolutely right. Like I said, I thought the line was a little over the top, but seeing everyone come together and you have, whether it's as Guardians, whether it's the Guardians of the Galaxy, whether it's our heroes of Earth, Spider-Man coming through. I think it's really cool to see everyone together. You
Yeah.
truly do have everyone because you were missing some pieces in Infinity War. Now you do have everyone, all of our heroes of the MCU together.
Right, and I agree. And the last big beat in this one is, um, Captain Marvel's arrival is so cool in this movie. The cannons are raining down. They're about to, they're taking cover and everything. They're almost about to lose to these huge barrage from Thanos' ship. And then all the cannons start lifting up and pointing at the sky and shooting. And they're like, what are they shooting at? And then, boom, Captain Marvel comes through and just wrecks Thanos' ship. Boom, boom, it comes through. And then Captain America says, Danvers, we could use an assist here. And then I love that part. And then she fights Thanos with the
Yes.
Infinity
Yeah.
Gauntlet on, totally wrecking him, showing how much powerful she is. I love her in this movie. And her new costume and everything is so cool. And she has the short haircut like she does in the comics, which I love
Yep.
that version in the comics. I love that part. She's so great. And Thanos headbutts her and she doesn't feel a thing. She just looks at him annoyed. I love that part. It's so cool. She's so
Yeah.
awesome in this movie.
Well, yeah, because, and I think you'll argue this, that she doesn't have to have an emotional arc. She's just there to be this ultra powerful superhero.
I can agree. I can
Yeah.
totally agree with that. And I love last thing on Captain Marvel for me. I love the part where she says, lands down and Peter Parker's there. She goes, "Hi, I'm Peter Parker," and she goes, "Hey, Peter Parker, you got something for me?" I love that part.
Yeah, that
It's
is
so cool.
yeah.
Yeah, you like that part too.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome scene. I couldn't agree more with you.
Yeah, and I
Once
mean,
again, perfect.
yeah.
We've got a true huge battle going on, and the Russo brothers aren't afraid to make us laugh.
I love that part about it. And I mean, seeing Black Panther carry that Infinity Gauntlet and hand it off to Spider-Man, something I never thought I would see on screen. That was just like a full realization for me. I was like, wow, I would never thought I could see all this happening at the same time on screen. I mean, I don't know about you, Ryan, but for me, I've always loved superheroes since I was a little kid. And even back in the day, I remember when people would look down on superheroes a little bit. People thought it was stupid. I know people had made fun of me before for liking Batman and Superman and other superheroes. But I mean, this is a big validation seeing this kind of movie on the big screen, the most profitable movie ever in the history of film. Everybody loves this movie, and I think we can all agree that we all become the same person when we watch these movies. We all love it. And
Yeah, absolutely. And I
yeah,
think it's amazing to see what the MCU has done. Personally, growing up, I was always more of a DC fan. Batman, Superman, the Justice League. Would have never thought in a million years that it would be Iron Man and Captain America would be our two pillar heroes here. But the universe they have built and really unifying just about everybody as a superhero fan for these films has been truly, truly incredible to watch over the past now, what, almost 15 years?
yeah,
And
almost.
I'm so excited to see where they go with Phase 4.
Yeah, me as well. And let's just talk about the final moments of this movie before we head out. The ending with Tony Stark's death, I thought that was very powerful. Seeing Spider-Man mourn him a little bit, and then the funeral sequence at the end. Captain America, he goes back in time and he stays there, and he lives his life with Peggy Carter, and he gets that final dance he's always wanted. But I think it's something important we need to talk about that this movie did great. I don't know if you ever picked up on this, Ryan, but especially in the times we are in now, I know you and me have been paying attention to everything that's going on in America, but Captain America, a white man, hands off the mantle of Captain America, the Shield, to Sam Wilson, the Falcon, a African American man. And I think that's a big passing of the torch. It's almost like they were saying, let's hand off this legacy to people of color in America.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see where that whole story arc goes when we have coming out later this year, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because Sam Wilson's truly an awesome character. I love his backstory. I know we touched on it a little bit in the Winter Soldier, but a military paratrooper, correct?
Correct.
So truly a nation's hero
Yeah.
who gets to then come and be a superhero. So I'm really excited to see his storyline. I love Anthony Mackie's portrayal as Falcon, and I really am excited to see where he goes. And you're absolutely right there. That's a really powerful scene as well.
Yeah, I could agree that. So I mean, we love Avengers Endgame, top of the list for me. So is that it? Anything else you got for me, Ryan?
Yeah, I think we're gonna run through the list just one more time from
Okay.
both of us. So our list at number 5, we're gonna go Captain Marvel. At number 4, we will go
Ant-Man and the
with
Wasp.
Ant-Man and the Wasp. Thank you. Number 3, Spider-Man Far From Home. And then we'll flip-flop at the top here, but definitely both 10 out of 10s. For me, it's Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War. Dom?
For me, number 2, Avengers Infinity War. Number 1, top of the list, Avengers Endgame. And I think that we've basically exhausted all the time we have right now. So stay tuned for us next week. I think, Ryan, what are we going to do next week? Are we sure?
I think we're going to dive into the Harry Potter film. So we
Yes.
haven't decided yet if we're going to break that down into 2 parts, but we will be doing the Harry Potter films, either all 8 films, or we
We could
may
do
do
4 and 4.
1 through 4, and
Yeah.
then 5, 6, 7 part 1 and 7 part 2. So I think we will break it down into 2 episodes. So stay tuned for that. But signing us off here. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Top of the List. My name is Ryan Barnett, RB. You can find me on Instagram at RB_the_SID. Dom?
Yep, I'm Dom. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Dom Gonzalez48, DOMGONZALES 48. And please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our videos. Let us know down in the comments if you agree with our list, or if not, what's at the top of the list for you. And with that said, we'll go ahead and see you next week.